Verdicts in litigation have long been an issue in the trucking industry. With the arising of the COVID-19 pandemic, what effect's that going to have? How is that going to change things both in the near term and long term? To find out, we went to Dr. Bill Kanasky Jr., Vice President of Courtroom Sciences, Inc., a company focused on litigation psychology, jury consultant, and deposition services. This is what Dr. Kanasky shared with us in terms of the near-term and long-term effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on juries and on verdicts. Bill, during this time, we are looking at a situation where we have truckers seen as the heroes of the nation, delivering what they need. At the same time, we have people in great economic distress and things in terms of unemployment and other situations they're confronting. Where do you see this currently with regard to litigation in general and jurors in particular?
Well, I think it's a really unpredictable time right now. And, many jurors notoriously are more of a what have you done for me lately type of group. And so I think as the topic of this pandemic is still on the news constantly, you have a lot of very positive public PR in the trucking and transportation industry. I do see that carrying over into juror attitudes, being generally more positive towards truckers. That being said, I think there's some severe exceptions here. You have what we call in litigation psychology these judicial hellholes, where I don't care who you are, they're going to be negative attitudes no matter what. So I think in some of the venues around the country, I think the positive messaging regarding the trucking industry will have a great impact. I think it's going to really help trial attorneys develop their storytelling model. They're going to have a lot of information to use in jury selection about the role of truckers during the pandemic. I think that you're going to see this being worked into opening statements, and it's going to be something very positive. At the same time, when you look at places like Philadelphia, Memphis, New Orleans, Los Angeles, East Texas, I don't think those people are going to care one way or the other. So I think what this really emphasizes to me is going forward is, I'm not saying that all of the data we've collected over 30 years is useless on jury decision making, but I do think there's going to have to be some upgrades, particularly in the area of focus group and mock trials, to determine what venues are changing and what venues are not. Because if you go on the data that you have, let's say over the last 10 years, you may make some pretty expensive errors in jury selection and your theming.
Well, one of the other things along those lines, Bill, is, and I just had this a couple of weeks ago with a virtual mediation out of Louisiana, was the attitude of, the trucking companies are doing great now. They're the ones prospering during the pandemic, missing what we in the industry know. It depends on what freight you haul and what type of operation you have. Your thoughts on that carrying over to verdicts at all, Bill?
Again, I think it's going to be venue by venue. I don't think the trucking industry is perceived by jurors as being, big corporation, big business with, huge profit margins, like a Microsoft or an Amazon. I don't think that they're seen in the same light. So I think if plaintiff attorneys try to play that card, I do think it'll backfire on them. I do think that the story of the trucking role during the pandemic, which is, by the way, it's been the same story for the last 50 years, just wasn't a pandemic, so it wasn't all over the news. At the same time, I also do a lot of work beyond trucking. I do a lot of work in the healthcare industry. And I have to tell you, there was a time in this country where a physician or a nurse couldn't be touched in a courtroom. That's all changed. And listen, they've been heroes for a long time. And again, so I think it's going to be more of a what have you done for me lately? And I think that the challenge with the trucking industry is going to be carrying over the positive message beyond the pandemic. And, it's funny. So now, you're at home a lot and you're watching maybe a lot of TV or a lot of news. I swear every commercial break, I see a plaintiff attorney advertisement, every single one of them, sometimes two in the same commercial break. And if I drive over to Home Depot to get some of my home improvement tools, the things I'm working on while I'm here, I see 7 billboards on the way. I don't see much about truckers. And so I think the challenge to the industry is going to be, once this pandemic slows down, to prevent the "what have you done for me lately." It's going to be more of a message of, not only were we there during the worst time, we've actually always been there, and more of a public education of what the trucking industry does. And it's just, not a bunch of guys, that you see at truck stops every day, or these big trucks that speed by you on the highway. There's a role there. And one of the things I was thinking about, I was kicking around the idea with my colleagues, is that really no one knows the life of a trucker, and or what their families go through, the types of challenges in that field. Now, again, back to healthcare. Healthcare has really educated the public a lot about that, but you have all of these nuclear verdicts going on across all industries, and the amount of press that they're getting is absolutely enormous. And so you combine the negative press on nuclear verdicts, combine that with very aggressive plaintiff attorney advertising, you're not going to be able to compete with that. So it's really going to be the trucking, both at the company level and at the industry level, making sure to put, and it's going to cost money, sorry, but to put the money and resources and energy into getting that positive message out there, and then maintaining it for years to come. That's how you're going to influence jury decision making.
Bill, one of the other things is situations like this. We had it post 2008 Great Recession. What do you think in terms of just litigation suits themselves? Are we going to see an influx because of the economic and financial distress people are living in?
You're going to see a huge influx, number one. And then number two, the whole, like, what we don't know, because everybody's guessing right now. I've got my crystal ball out. We don't know what the role of sympathy is going to play at this point, particularly people that have been laid off, they're unemployed, they're furloughed. They're going through a lot of emotional pain right now. And by the way, the worst jury you possibly want on a jury, if you're the defense, is an emotional juror. Well, the number of those is going to quadruple. And so, our jurors going to come in and see claims, particularly injury claims that aren't really catastrophic. Are they going to see those differently and kind of laugh them off? Like, are you kidding me? Look at what my family and I have been through, and you're going to sue this trucking company because you're probably driving like an idiot too. So how that is going to impact things, I think will be interesting. I do think that you'll probably see a lot of increased litigation, more in the commercial and business litigation, people fighting over money, and how does that impact civil litigation involving injuries? Again, I think it's going to be region by region. I think some regions will probably get far less sympathetic to personal injury claims because they're going to laugh them off, whereas those judicial hellholes, it may actually get worse.
Yeah. And one of the other things that on a bill, kind of a basic level, for the next 4-6 months, the composition of jurors themselves.
Totally.
Who's going to come in, and can we have risk groups, and is that going to skew the demographics?
It's definitely going to skew the demographics, number one. A prediction I have, and this may be on a part-time basis. Here in Florida, we've always had a 6-person jury. I think you may see a lot of these states that have 12-person juries may get cut down to 6 temporarily, just so people feel comfortable. So that if you're in a state like Illinois, your juror pool gets cut in half.
Yeah.
Another thing I think you're going to see and I consult on a lot of jury selections, and I recall several of times where a juror didn't show up, and the judge looks at the bailiff and says, "Get the sheriff to this guy's house immediately."
Yeah.
I think between people not showing up and just cause challenges of, hey, I'm really not comfortable, I think you're going to see a lot of leniency.
Mm-hmm.
And so who is actually showing up versus who's not going to show, I think that is completely unpredictable at this point. And even especially if you're unemployed, it's like, okay, listen, do I want to spend 2 weeks at trial getting paid $17, or do I want to be out looking for a job every day? I think that's a real unpredictable wild card on who is actually going to show up. And I do think that that's going to differ from venue to venue. If you look at the hot spots, like New York City, Manhattan, Southern California, Louisiana, that's going to be completely up in the air. Whereas you look at maybe a place like Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, they may go back to business as usual. So I think it's going to be very important for transportation companies and their defense counsel to see things very differently and look at these venues on a venue by venue basis when developing strategy. Because the old way of, well, here's how we defend this type of cause of action, that's not going to work anymore. And so it's going to require a lot of homework being done. And I anticipate, and again, it's going to come at a cost, but it's so critical that the value of jury research in these venues is going to be critical because of the new attitudes and sort of the raw emotions going forward.
Bill, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it very much.
I'm always here, and good luck with your conference.
Thank you.
Take care.